Question for James Cromwell, Helen Mirren, and Stephen Frears. How did each of their sympathies ebb and flow during this in terms of their relationship to all the characters?
You sort of can't... If you're British, the royal family, it's very, very complicated. They are laughed at non-stop, and they are, in many respects, quite ridiculous. On the other hand, you can't make a film from any position other than one of sympathy for or curiosity about the sort of human beings that are underneath it all. I mean, just to make fun of them, well, I say that's what most people do. The extraordinary thing about this film is it takes them seriously. That already is a sort of shocking, shockingly original thing to have done. So, you know, you in the end, there's a sort of, I don't know where the line, you draw the line, because I like the jokes just as much as anybody else does. So the jokes are always the tricky point, because they're so funny and so irresistible, but of course they force you inexorably down, maybe down a more caricature-ish path. But you sort of have to start being on the side of the characters, don't you? All the characters.
Well, I mean, inevitably, and actually, Michael Sheen, who plays Tony Blair, it describes exactly the same thing. As an actor, you inevitably kind of fall in love with your character, no matter who it is. Even if it's Macbeth, you know, you find reasons to love them the way we all find reasons to love ourselves. So that was sort of certainly what happened with me. I found myself absolutely loving the Queen, and you know, it's embarrassing for me to do that. You know, it's not very cool.
Yes, we're now a sort of disgrace.
Yes, we are.
But you're all Republicans. You should be ashamed of yourself. Why haven't you burnt down the cinema? Strung us up.
Because we're Democrats.
As an American, my sympathies originally were with Diana, because my experience of her, as most Americans and most people in the world, is from the distance that the press, I mean, that's how I experienced her, not personally. And what I noticed happen in the film was that I realized that that family knew her in a way that almost nobody else did. Whatever her transgressions were in terms of that family, they felt them deeply, and it justified the behavior that they then manifested. So you have this sort of push-pull. I sympathize with their dilemma. At the same time, I think my observation is of an incredibly dysfunctional family that has caused immeasurable harm to the children, and I think as an American, I suppose the Brits feel the same way. I think that's a shame and a waste, and I'm sorry it had to contribute somewhat to her demise.
Speaking of the children, actually I found the creation of the part of Charles very, very touching. I didn't expect when I started watching the movie that I'd feel a lot of sympathy for him, but I wound up feeling a lot of sympathy for him in the film. It's a wonderful performance, and also just the way it's written. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I've had feedback this week from his friends. It's come to me through various sources, and they're really pissed off. So I'm delighted that you are that you found it to be sympathetic. I mean, I think, you know, we tried and tried and tried. In fact, you know, had the Charles that we originally shot, you know, remained in the film in its entirety, the subplot, the storyline, you know, it was more inflammatory. In fact, this material is like a sort of haemophiliac. It bruises so easily. If you just touch it, you suddenly get a huge swelling. You suddenly realize, God, you know, we have to. Even though I think the scenes in themselves weren't inflammatory, the fact that Charles was making a phone call from the cockpit of the aeroplane in which Diana's coffin was being brought back from Paris, and that he was on the phone to Camilla Parker Bowles. It just seemed so, shocking, and that in the end Stephen's decision to take all that stuff out seemed really, really smart. Just because we were trying to protect him from the haemophiliac nature of himself in that sense. People tell me he's, and I've never met him, but people tell me that his allies tell me that he's more substantial and significant than perhaps I portrayed. But let me tell you, so many of his detractors spoke to me that I thought, I tried, and we all tried, just to navigate our way through this toxic bitchery that we got. Every time we went to speak to anybody, they were spinning like crazy, all these various palaces, and it was very difficult sometimes to see a kind of neutral, human, halfway compassionate, realistic line through that.